So, good afternoon. If you're coming here to see the Silver Bullet Syndrome, wrong room. This is the syndrome. So there wasn't some thing that I had invented. Right, had a nice lunch? I was going to ask that, but then I thought we're at Devoxx, so that's kind of a silly question. Yeah. Little disclaimer up front. Who's here to learn? Okay, wrong room. I'm serious. You are not going to learn anything here. This is more of my frustration again. So this is a talk about not much. So if you want to learn something, there's like 6 other parallel tracks. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now with this, let's get on. Presentations 101. I've been giving presentations for quite some time. And as you give presentations, you start to pick up a bunch of tips and tricks and better ways to do things. And normally, you need to try and give talks that are informative, so that you've given your valuable time to someone they've given their valuable time to you to come and listen to you. So you want to make sure that they get the best out of that 1 hour or 45 minutes they give you. To be thought-provoking. That's one of the key things in giving presentations. It's about thinking about what someone has just said. Not necessarily agreeing, but thinking. Entertaining, because people get bored. Inspirational. Again, it's good to inspire people to do great things. And you shouldn't have any foul language. So given that, this talk is the complete anti-pattern of everything there is in Presentations 101. Okay, so I will try my best to not align it with any of those requirements. I also usually don't talk a little bit about myself, but this time I will to put you into context. That was me. Microsoft thought I was 2 years old, more or less accurate. I was born in Iran. At some point, my mother said we're moving to Spain, and I got into computers and became grumpy. And that's basically my life. Now I've got 3 kids and they look at me and I say, why don't you learn to program? And they say, to grow up and be like you. I'm like, good point. Touché. Background to this talk, because everything should have a background. Everything should be a why. A friend of mine, Greg Young, he puts on a conference in Vilnius and he said to me, why don't you come and give a talk there? I said, this is brilliant, and it's actually a very good, we're at a conference, so I won't comment, but he said, come and talk there, and I said, Lithuania, Vilnius, it's good, it's about to, right before it was going to enter the euro, so, before the prices jacked up and everyone lost their lives. And he said, but, there's always a but, right, there's always a but, and I said, yes, what, Greg? And he says, you have to give a talk on WCF. Now, how many of you know Microsoft? Right, this is a technology from Microsoft. And he said, you have to come and give a talk about WCF. And that's kind of like, getting that wedding invitation that you've so been eager to make sure you're on the list, opening it up and getting this instead of the actual address. And you kind of question now, like me, WCF, why? I mean, how is that related? I've made some mistakes in my life. One of them was to write a book. And I wrote a book on WCF. And if that wasn't bad enough, I wrote it in Spanish. Spain is very good at reading books. They just don't know that you can purchase them. So it's, you already don't make much money out of books, and I live in Spain, and yes, so anyway. So now if you Google WCF Hadi, my book shows up, and I'm trying to file a request with Google to get my name removed because, some things you do want people to forget. So going back to WCF, and I've been doing software development for many, many years, and before there was WCF, there was a thing called Corba, right? How many of you remember Corba? Corba was a fantastic technology. And then I grew up in this thing called Delphi. Delphi people around here? Yeah, still rocks. David I still there saying it rocks as well. And Delphi had this other thing called Midas, which was great, which was kind of like a distributed way to make applications. And when it first came out, it was like $5,000 to buy a license, but it really simplified everything. So we deployed it once, bought a license. 2 weeks later, Borland announced that they were making it free, and I had a hell of a hard time getting my money back from Borland, Spain. But nonetheless, I used to use Midas. If you weren't in the Delphi camp, Microsoft also contributed very significantly to this with DCOM, because they said, take COM and make it even worse by distributing it. And made us all suffer. And then one great day came that one great unification. And they said to us, you have this programming model, and you have this service model, and you have this channels. And it was like unifying everything that you had ever seen in the past. COM, SOAP, everything you could think of. It was brilliant. It really was. It was like a unified model for all your communication needs. It complied with the 4 pillars of SOA. Now, just minor little note, these 4 pillars of SOA were written by Don Box, who at the time also worked for Microsoft. So it would be the same company behind WCF, so it would be a kind of awkward if it didn't comply with the 4 pillars. But of course, it didn't comply with Thomas Earle's 11 pillars of SOA. Nonetheless, they promised us that this was the silver bullet, that everything we had challenges with in the past was over. And they used to go around saying, well, we used to go around saying this is as easy as ABC, because it was like 3 things. It had address, it had binding, it had contract. So address was who you want to talk to, binding was how you wanted to talk to them, and contract was what you were going to basically say. Really simple, like really easy as ABC. And the great thing about this is that you would configure it at runtime. Right, and configuration back then, in the old days, it was done with XML. And of course, it had its own kind of configuration manual and patterns and structures. Here's a snapshot of it. It didn't fit on one slide, so there's a third slide as well, just to give you a little bit of perspective. And they said to us, if you build it with WC, it will run. Now, the tiny little, if you manage to configure it, of course. If you manage to do that, it was all great. And every Microsoft evangelist or book author used to say this. But things started to fail. And they said to us, well, your issue is WCF. Right, WCF is a problem, that's the issue, and the promises weren't delivered. And you're kind of like, but I just rewrote this. You came in and you sold me this, and you said this was my salvation. But no, it just didn't work. And then someone had the bright idea of saying every class should be a service. And you kind of like, right. So the silver bullet was not delivered, and the rest is history, and you will know all about that, right? Yes. Now, I have good news for you Java campers, that if one thing that ever held you back from adopting Microsoft technology or WCF was because it wasn't open source, you'll be glad to know that WCF is now open source. So you can go right ahead and adopt it. And it wouldn't be fair for me to stand up here and just criticize Microsoft, because you guys have it too, right? Java has it too. You know, like I have a problem, now I have a problem factory with Java. And I was at Devoxx France, and we were at the speaker dinner, and we were walking around with, they'd organized this amazing trip on the boat going down the river and going and seeing the Eiffel Tower at night. And I was up there with my friend, and we were taking some pictures. And Antonio Conclaves, awesome guy, stands next to me. He's like, you look like such tourists, well, in the French accent. And I'm like, well, we are. I mean, technically, we are tourists. And then he says, like there has never been anything in the history of mankind so ugly and completely pointless as the Eiffel Tower. And I said, that is not true. There is Java 2 EE as well, right? And Java 2 EE brought us a lot of things. It brought us FizzBuzz Enterprise Edition, which is fantastic. You go there, look at it, it's awesome. And then Spring came along and said, let's build a better enterprise. And Spring introduced Abstract Singleton Proxy Factory Bean, which is an actual class from Spring. And the help says, convenient proxy factory bean superclass for proxy factory beans that create only singletons. I did not make that up. No, seriously, that is from the help file. It makes you wonder. That's why you guys have a bad reputation of you like factories for everything. But there is hope. There is hope. Not all is lost. Something is about to save us. And you all know what I'm talking about, right? It's microservices. Now, if you're not familiar with microservices, it's a lot of little things that are interconnected with each other and kind of each of them have this little functionality and they're set out to kind of make things work for you in a nice way. It's kind of like doing a lot of little SOAs, right? Except that nobody in their right mind would today say, I'm doing SOA, because you wouldn't be able to sell it. But if you say microservices, you can. Difference is that you kind of like fail small, fail often, and fail a lot. Or to put another way, you move from a single ball of mud to orchestrating a lot of shit. But there's tools to help you orchestrate that. And my friend Simon, that's here speaking as well, he said, I'll keep saying this, if people can't build monoliths properly, microservices won't help. Now, this is good, though, because it's got its positive side, because it's got us thinking, and it's taken us into having conversations like, how many lines is a microservice? Right? How many, not even classes, now we're just talking about lines. Now, the good thing for us is that tools can help. Tools can help, and in fact, I have been prototyping a tool for IntelliJ, which is extracting microservices for you. So you can basically select some code and then just extract the microservice. You really don't. We're always there looking out for you, right? And of course, some people heard about microservices, and you know when microservices has already come mainstream when you go to microservices.org and it redirects to IBM. I also heard that recently IBM purchased the Weather Channel, and it's like, did they get the whole cloud thing? A silver bullet, right? But it is a silver bullet. Microservices now is a silver bullet, and we'll see in 6 years, of course, but by then it'll be great. And of course, this isn't only with services and orchestration and distributed applications. We've got this with everything. We've got this with data persistence, right? In the early days, we all wrote our own DALs, data abstract layer. Who's here written their own DAL? Excellent. And we used to call it kind of like repositories. And then someone said ORMs are much, much better. And we're kind of like, no, I know better. No, ORMs really, really are better. So what did we do? We wrote our own ORMs. And we called them MyN Hibernate and Your Hibernate and MSN Hibernate, or a.k.a., also known as Entity Framework. And we said, no, actually, this isn't good. We shouldn't be rewriting and reinventing the wheels. Maybe we should use nhibernate. And then what did we do? Well, we created abstractions on top of nhibernate and hibernate. And we made this like typical repository panel. And then we found out, well, now we're losing all of the features of the ORM mapper, and we're not really doing much. But hey, if we ever have to switch ORMs, well, we can. How many of you switch ORMs frequently? Yeah, exactly. But as there was some consultant somewhere that said ORMs are bad, right? They are. ORMs are bad. And they said you should separate your writes from your reads. Now, in the old days, this is, if you Googled this, it would say, did you mean cars? Of course, we're talking about CQRS, right? Who does CQRS here? And of course, if you do CQRS, which is command query responsibility segregation, you have to do event sourcing, even though you don't, but you do, because it sounds much better. So event sourcing is even a good thing. And then we realized that, of course, this wasn't the DAL, it wasn't the ORM, it wasn't the reads write, it was none of that. The problem was the actual storage. It was what we were using to store the data, because SQL had become kind of like antiquated. It was no longer the in thing to use. And it came about NoSQL, which nobody knows what it means, except it doesn't mean NoSQL or not SQL or not only SQL. And they said, this is how you store things. Cassandra, Couch database, Hadoop, or whether you'd want to store things. And we basically went to the silver bullet again, right? Now the SQL model has gone out the window, and now everyone has to do document databases. And of course, we're kind of finding out that this isn't the case either. Then someone said, no, it's the platform that sucks, right? And not only the platform sucks, but your community sucks too, right? I back then was in the .NET community, and there was a bunch of people saying that .NET sucks, and what you need to do is Node.js. How many of you have heard that? Okay, you might have heard this version of it. JVM sucks. How many of you, you should do Node.js? Why? Because awesome, right? Why? Because awesome source. Okay, of course, too bad for the Node people. Node sucks. Now everyone's got to do Go. And we get articles that say Go is going to rival the enterprise and the Java developers, and Go is the thing to do. You look back 8 months and you get Node is going to rival Java developers, and Node is the thing to do. And if you look back 2 years, you'll get some other technology. Now, normally when people start to promote these things, they usually do it in the form of not, I've just moved, trying this new thing out, it's awesome, let me share it with you. No, they normally do a big blog post. I'm leaving Java, or I'm leaving .NET. And it's a whole bunch of words, but certain keywords come out, right? Because too much ceremony, scale, enterprise, you don't help each other, and you're awful mean people. And then we get coverage in the media, such as, I've moved to Node.js and our productivity has increased tenfold by some tech lead somewhere. Or we now ship microservices using Docker, aligning our technology stack with our business needs. All this is made possible with Go. You hear this every day, right? Right, yes. Some CTO somewhere. And of course, I remember back in the old days when I was talking about Ruby and Rails, and they're like, Ruby and Rails, it's awesome. What is it? Twitter uses it. What's Twitter? Right, so it's this thing that when you're eating a pizza, you say, I'm eating a pizza. And then everyone knows you're eating a pizza. Okay. And look what it is now. Still trying to make profit out of the pizza. But of course, when Ruby was abandoned at Twitter, no one said, oh, Rails has been abandoned from Twitter. No, well, now they're using Scala. And you kind of wonder, was it actually the platform, or was it our code? Actually, it wasn't even our code, because the code technically changed. So was it us? Hey, we don't know. But nonetheless, they promised us that silver bullet. But there's more. There's more. Now we realize that there's other issues, and the problem is the actual paradigm. So how many of you have read this book? Right. Now, back in the old days, and the old days I'm talking about 8 months ago, when you used to, there was a blog. I clearly remember this post. It was by a coding horror, Jeff Atwood, and he wrote this blog post about how he's not read this book. And there was 6,780 comments of how can you possibly call yourself a software engineer by not having read this book? Every software developer needs to read this book, right? Nowadays, you say, I've read this book, and they look at you like you're some grandmother or grandfather that's really? You're still doing object-oriented programming? It's all about functional now, right? Nowadays, it's about functional programming. And in fact, I heard this on Twitter a few months ago, which someone said from the JavaScript community, functional programming is a radical new paradigm. That was only invented 40, 60, 50, 60 years ago. But, right. Now, if you have been doing functional programming, you know that there's only one way to do functional programming, and that is Haskell. Now, you see, if you were to ask this in a .NET crowd, they would shout F#, right? You know why? By the way, do you know how an application is written in F#? Because they bloody tell you. It's Haskell, of course. If you're not doing Haskell, well, you can do Frege now on the JVM. You're not doing functional programming. Fortunately for us, we don't have to learn Haskell because the future is bright. And it's in the form of JavaScript. And do you question yourself, is JavaScript a functional language? If it is a language, then yes, technically it is somewhat functional. Yeah. They didn't like this when I did this at a JavaScript conference. Someone said, the speaker is taking a crap on the JavaScript community. I said, no, that's technically not true. I'm taking a crap on every community. But good news is I've been part of every community as well, so I have the right, I have the privilege to do that. It's like I can come on stage and make a joke about Iranians. Why? Because I'm Iranian. I can also make it about Spain because I'm Spanish. Yeah. Two things. Awesome. Anyway, JavaScript, love it or hate it, it is productive, right? It is actually a very productive language, and I'm saying this with a straight face. We have Node. Now, if you're not familiar with what Node is, imagine the mess that we made on the client side. We can now do that on the server side. Now, a few years ago, what happened is that Node kind of split. A few years ago, sorry, under a year ago, Node split. And there was this article on Wired. You can see it. It's back from, when is it? 12th of the 3rd, which, if that's US date or not, yes, it's US date. No, it's not. 12th of the 3rd, future of properly coding tool in doubt after it splits into two. Immediately afterwards, someone tweeted, if you're stuck on legacy technology like Node.js, and you're kind of like, but literally that only happened 2 weeks ago. And this was they were using, some library was using the fork. Fortunately, a new foundation was born, and they made up. Wired didn't even bother changing the image, right? They thought, well, it works as a fork, but if you look at it the other way, it works as a merge. So yeah, great. And everyone was like, cool, awesome, fork Node, fork is back together, fantastic. And then Microsoft goes and says, Microsoft plans to fork and extend Node.js. They're like, really? Didn't you just read the news in the past 2 weeks? But anyway, Microsoft for you. Now, the great part about Node is of course, it's not so much the JavaScript, but it's the ecosystem. So if you go to NPM, NPM is a website where you can download packages, and it says NPM is the package manager for Node. If you wait a while, it says NPM is the package manager for Bower, and if you're wondering what Bower is a package manager. I honestly, I don't know if I'm joking or serious at some points. And, there is 22 million downloads, 158,000 packages back when I took this screenshot. And they've got very good discoverable names: Testacular, Moron.js, Happy, Shit.js, Things.js, Whatever.js. I'm not making that up. In fact, another friend of mine had a game which was like a drinking game for web developers. Think of a noun, Google noun.js. If a library with that name exists, drink. And you will get drunk, I guarantee. I guarantee you. But now Node.js, NPM has given us a marvelous amount of packages that people write. You don't even care what the code looks like or whether it has got security vulnerabilities. Just go ahead and use it. It's all awesome source. It also gives us excellent frameworks, right? How many of you used AngularJS? AngularJS, right? It's awesome, right? And I want to place emphasis on the by and the Google, which basically means that since it's by Google, it's kind of like guaranteed upgrades. How many of you have converted to 2.0? Yeah, right. Right. Now, I saw this. I used AngularJS. It was one of the mistakes I made in my life that I openly admit. Worst part is I kind of recommended it to others as well, so anything I recommend, ignore. But I said, enough with this. I'm not using AngularJS. I'm jumping on the React bandwagon. Okay, I am going with React.js. React.js is great. It's an alternative to AngularJS. It's componentized. It's by Facebook. How many of you use React.js? Right, it's really, really cool. If you go to the website, in fact, this is one version of the website. There's another version that has a compatibility certificate that basically says to you that, if you use this, it will certify compatibility. And this, of course, is because of when AngularJS 2.0 was announced and it wasn't compatible. The whole React.js community was like, you see, I told you, you should have been using React.js because that magically does offer you compatibility into the future. And if you don't know React.js, you should learn it, because React Native allows you to now do native mobile development, and they say that it's a game changer. Someone said. So therefore, it is a game changer. React comes with a way to organize your application. So how many of you are familiar with MVC? Right, Model View Controller. React tried to simplify that. And what you have is this thing called a Flux Architecture, which is basically you have a web API, and then you have web API utils, then you have these things called action creators that go on to dispatchers that then have callbacks that then go to the store, that then gets the change events, store queries, sends them to React views, and the user interaction comes in. And you kind of look at this and you're like, where did we go wrong? Really, where did we go wrong? Of course, some people have experienced this. They've realized that it's not the best way to do things, so they've come up with another framework, which you might have heard of, which is not Flux, but called Reflux. Unfortunately, this is the only diagram I found about it. So apparently, though, it is better. So let's see if React.js is that silver bullet. Now, the good thing about AngularJS and React.js is that these are basically all frameworks. There's a kind of like a whole discussion going on, and where do I draw the line between a framework and a library? Is it when a library calls me, or I call a framework, or framework calls my mother? I don't know. But if you follow that path, then it's all okay. If you don't like React.js, if you don't like AngularJS, just wait a few days, and I'm sure someone in the JavaScript community will come up with a new framework, because it's just a matter of days. Frameworks appear now and then. And this continuous frameworks has given birth to isomorphism. How many of you have heard of that? So isomorphism is basically, to summarize, we started out doing client-server applications, web applications, and we said that the server-side rendering isn't smooth. And someone said, I know, let's do this on the client side. And we said, okay, that's great, but client-side rendering is hard because we've got to deal with JavaScript and all of these things. And someone said, let's create a framework, which is fantastic. Now we've got AngularJS and blah, blah, blah. We can do all of these. And then someone else said, I lost my SEO. And we're like, I know, let's create another framework. And that other framework is an isomorphic framework, which basically allows you to render the same thing on the client and on the server, which is fantastic. So again, if you don't like that, there's also vapor.js. And you just include that. It's an empty script. People have actually forked that, thinking it's a framework. But there is hope. There is hope. The TypeScript language recently visited Google, and they had a great chat. And we all know the result of that. AngularJS 2 now uses TypeScript, so there is some typing in JavaScript. If you don't like JavaScript, there is a movement which says we deserve a better language than JavaScript. There's actually a lot. You should maybe look beyond your current browser window. But there's 527 signatures, so you can go and sign that and get rid of JavaScript. Personally, I want JavaScript to die into the VM and just become a VM. We never have to deal with it again. Now, getting back to React and talking about bad naming, I lied to you just earlier because already there's been advances in our industry, and we are beyond functional programming. We are now reactive. Right, and don't call it functional reactive programming. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. If you don't care, you like those kind of arguments, and you're tired of arguing about whether JavaScript needs a semicolon, go ahead and enter that one. But we are doing functionally reactive programming, and what do we do as developers, as a community, when some new technology comes out? The first thing we do is we create a manifesto for it. So there is a reactive manifesto which says that our applications need to be scalable, resilient, responsive, and elastic. So whatever, it's great. So this is fantastic because now it allows me to say something like this. I am developing a functionally reactive, RESTful microservice, and I'm writing it in Rx CoffeeScript, building it with Grunt, and shipping it in Docker. Fantastic, and that actually makes sense. And we can do that today. Why are you here? You can be doing this. Because containers are a thing now, Docker, right? How many use Docker? Right. Docker is the thing. And my conclusion to this is that because the only way that we can guarantee that working software works is to ship our own machine, right? Yeah, deploying apps are hard. Let's just ship it. Silver bullet, because building software is hard. And in fact, it is hard. If we look back at the history of how we build software, how many of you use Make? Right, Make was around for many, many years, and then there was Ant, and Ant like kind of brought the XML, then came out Maven, and brought its own diagram, kind of like the WCF one, and then someone said Ruby, and someone else said, ooh, expressive, and then they said DSLs, and well, everything went loose from there, and we got Rake for Ruby, and JVM kind of got Gradle, and .NET got Passaic, which is PowerShell Rake, Cake, which is C# Rake, Fake, which is actually very good. It's F# Rake or Make. And guess what JavaScript got? Yes, Jake. There is a build tool called Jake. But JavaScript didn't have enough, and they invented Grunt. And Grunt was really, really ugly. Someone said it's really ugly, so let's go and invent Gulp. And now, to build, you have to pull in half of the internet. So now JavaScript has basically the same feature that Maven has, right? I'm going to start a new project. Let me go out for lunch. So if building software is hard, building scalable software is also harder. And we have scale, also known as Silicon Valley syndrome. Yes, Node.js because scale. But fortunately, we have awesome cloud providers that give us all that scalability that we need, because you need scale, right? It doesn't matter whether you're doing an application for a tiny little shop of 3 people. No, you need scale. One day, that business will grow. Well, it's run by a guy that's 70 years old and he has no kids. No, but one day it will scale. Imagine if tomorrow someone comes and buys it. You need scale. And they sell us this scale, right? They sell us this scale. Everything we do nowadays, it has to scale. And guess who's going to provide us that scale? Well, there you go. And new doors have opened for us because we didn't have enough with what we had. Now we've got the Internet of Things. Now, this is a Raspberry Pi connected to my toilet. And I took a picture of this. This is Raspberry Pi 1. Raspberry Pi 2 has some advances over this. I took a picture of this. I tweeted it, and I said, now I can actually not turn around to pull the flush. And my Twitter is there. Someone responded and said, how do you make sure the cable doesn't get wet? And now with IP6, every grain of sand in the world can have an IP address, which means that we can take Internet of Things to limits that we never imagined, right? Anything can become part of the system. And again, if Internet of Things isn't your thing, DevOps might be, because you can, empathy is you can tool it, hire on it, and certify on it, okay? So DevOps for the win. And finally, of course, I wasn't going to end this without having a beautiful mention about methodology, right? We have all been there where we have blamed everything that we have done on our methodology, and we have come to the conclusion that waterfall sucks, right? It does suck. Unfortunately, Scrum is now the new waterfall. Scrum sucks. I think last time I checked, a few hours ago, Lean doesn't suck as much, but maybe in a few weeks it will. So just sit back and enjoy. But if you think about it, we are actually geniuses. We really are. I mean, we're having awesome fun. It's great. And not only that, as a side effect, we have created a self-sustaining industry. That's it. If you look at the IT lifecycle and a new technology comes out, we recommend it. We sell it. Say, this is great. Of course, we're there to provide training for it and certification that you can get in 2 days and become a master. Then we implement it. Our customers put it in production. Something goes wrong, they call us. And guess what we have under our belt? A new technology, right? And it just goes over and over again. Now, this would be quite hypocritical of me to stand up here and say that, we've all got skin in this game because we tool it for you, right? And on top of that, now we offer it with subscriptions. If you look at a technology lifecycle, nowadays it's so fast-paced that you create a new framework. About 2 weeks later, they create a new conference around that framework, and then you just go to 10. And I'm going to stop now and shut up, right? And have a moment of silence and think about everything. And then you'll ask me, what is your point? There is no point. There is absolutely no point. And I gave you that disclaimer when you came into this talk. I've just been trying to talk slower and slower because I've got 23 minutes left. I have absolutely no point. Well, I do have one single point, which is there is no silver bullet. Now, how many of you came in here thinking that there is? Okay, so at least one person has learned something. Right. Thank you. Makes me feel good about myself. So, now, but the question is, if there is no silver bullet, then why are we constantly jumping onto new technologies? Why, right? So, to answer that question, you've got to ask yourself, why are we developing software? Okay, so let me ask you, why are you developing software? You like it. What else? It's fun. What else? Pays the bills. It's challenging. Right. Solves problems. Awesome. It helps people, right? Yes? How many of you got into software to get rich? May I ask, if it's not intruding, are you doing by any chance SAP or SharePoint? Because that's about the only way you're going to get rich, unless you invent something like Snapchat. So most of us got into this business for two reasons, mainly. One was I personally love to automate things. I really love to automate things. And to help people, because it's nice to solve things for people. That was kind of a longer term, it kind of started to grow on me. Of course, now we're automating actually those people we're helping out of a job, but that's a completely different discussion. But none of us really got into software as software itself. We didn't get into this because we said, we are going to spend the rest of our lives updating our system for the fact that we're updating our system, right? We didn't get into this to say, you know what I want to do? Oh, there's a new version of my dependency out. Let me upgrade to that. Why? Because I got nothing better to do, right? But there's a very, very, very high technology churn. And it's like every day something new is coming out. And you can't always be on the latest and greatest. It's kind of like those people that say, well, I'm not buying a laptop because I'm waiting for the next model to come out, right? You can't. You have to at some point buy hardware because it just, eventually you can pay €1,000 today and buy some hardware. You're not going to wait 2 days because it's going to become cheaper, right? Hardware, by and large, becomes cheaper unless it's MacBook. Then it has less ports and becomes more expensive. But everything gets cheaper, but it doesn't stop you from buying. But you say, no, but we're actually innovating. We're finding new ways to improve, right? And I say that is great. Innovation and improvements are good. And I'm serious about this. And I'm so serious that I have actually made this in red, in bold, and use Comic Sans, right? So if there's one slide you remember from this talk, it's this one. Improvement is good. But when we're improving, you got to ask yourself, what exactly is it that we're improving? Right? What is it that we are improving when we're doing that improvement? What business value does it add? And when I mean business value, it's not behavior-driven development, okay? In fact, take away business. What value does it add? What real value? Because we're not in this for the money either. And then that goes to well, how are we making these technology choices? When we're adopting new technology, how are we doing it? Do we use reasoning like, well, Walmart, which actually did, has moved to Node.js. Therefore, we need to move to Node.js. Okay. Or influenced by thought leaders or the industry. Speakers like myself. Oh, this is awesome. You got to move. Yes, let's move to that. Why? Well, it's great. Walmart moved. Facebook is using this. Google is using that. Right, but do we have the same needs as Walmart or Google or Netflix? Do the same conditions apply for us? Now, one thing is we would love for the same conditions to apply to us, and we kind of hide that. Yeah, we can scale. We might scale. We might want to scale. But does it apply? See, one thing that we often forget is context. And context is a really, really important word. Because what technology might apply to some company in some specific context might not apply to us in a specific context, right? As awesome as that technology might seem. And a technology choice has to be applied within a certain context. It's kind of like best practices. They need context. And I'll quote my the fellow speaker, Ted Newitt, that said, you know, breathing is a good best practice, but would you do it underwater with no equipment in the context of just with your mouth? Nothing else. Not really. So, again, how do we make these technology choices? Do we take things into account like the stability of the technology? And I found this coming from different ecosystems and communities like .NET, Java, JavaScript. I can tell you JavaScript, and in fact Charles Natter was saying it yesterday in that session, that, you know, they're less conservative. In the Java community, yeah, there's more conservatism. We like evaluate things a little bit more. JavaScript is like, oh, I did a framework at 0.0007.21 pre-alpha. I've put it on NPM, 1,000 forks, everyone's shipping it to production. Do we take into account that stability? Is it proven technology? I mean, right now, we have all of these amazing things talking about, you know, coming up with microservices and orchestrations and Docker and all of these. How proven are these technologies? Are we playing part of that guinea pig process? And what's the learning curve of these technologies? What is the market share, right? And when we break this down and we evaluate the costs, do we actually say, well, you know what? I could rewrite this new system, and it would cost me this much to do this module, that much to test, that much to that, and the total comes to this much. And yet, if I extend it, well, it might not be that exciting, and it might not be using the latest and greatest, but it might do its job, and it might cost me less. Do we do that analysis of costs? Do we actually then validate our investment? And do we say, oh yes, with the Node.js conversion, we actually save 3 hours a day in software development because there's loads of thousands of packages, and that saved us a lot of time. Yes, but those packages get outdated, people stop using them, they stop maintaining them, you get version conflicts. But these arguments have been used, myself included, right? I'm standing up here criticizing myself as much as myself. Because when things go bad, we're not the big corporations that can just burn the money. And what's more important, even if we do have a lot of money, does it impact our pay? How many of you get a pay cut because you chose the wrong technology and it's not your own business? Oh, you chose AngularJS, yes? Yes, well, it's not working out. Okay, well, you're not going to get paid this month. Why? Well, because we've got to rewrite it. Yeah, but okay, well, I don't have stake in the game. Yeah, but think about it a little bit. You know, if I were paying the bills, would I do this? And that's why there's this thing of this financial impedance mismatch that I say, right? The developers, often us, we don't have that direct link to the revenue. And that's why I think that it's important that all of us at some stage in our life have our own business and see how, by making the right and wrong choices, it does impact our paycheck. And take that into account. Because if it doesn't bring value, then why do it? And then the question is, are we confusing our desire to learn with business value? Right? Are we chasing the new shiny because we want to learn and we don't want to pay the bills for learning? Well, I can, and I'm guilty of this. I want to make a little side project. What should I use? I'll use Vertex. Why? Is it the most appropriate? No, but it'll be cool because I'll learn it as well. Is it the one that's going to bring me a better return on investment for that job? I'm not saying that what you learn is not valuable, but we've got to evaluate those costs as well. Or are we CV-driven design, right? Do we do things to kind of like boost our CV? Or is it based on social pressure? You know, I see this all the time. Oh, they're still using Delphi. Wow, is that thing still alive? Oh, yes. And in fact, you know, when a big pool shrinks, the little fish become really big. You get a lot of money as a COBOL developer nowadays. And in fact, the Rosetta comment posted on a Delphi blog, and they've written parts of it using Delphi. Whoa! And it went all that way. There was a thing that came out some time ago, which is JSON-X is an IBM standard format to represent JSON as XML. And you kind of look at that and you say, they must have been drunk, right? Because there is really no reason why anybody would want to do that. Maybe there is. Maybe it was cheaper to make this adapter than to rewrite something. And we laugh at it, and it's funny, but maybe there is actually a reason behind this. But you say, well, no, we need to attract talent. If we don't use awesome technologies, and you see this every day, right? Every single day. Come and work with us. We use blah, 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 and blah point 1.6. And then what do you get? You get CVs of, I know AngularJS, well, Durandal, that's no longer valid, it's Aurelia, React, jQuery, JavaScript, Java, Clojure, C#, VB, SQL Server, MongoDB. This is how we get our CVs. Which, in fact, we don't even need to make CVs. Some people say, oh, just point them to GitHub. Well, I don't do open source. And you call yourself a developer? And that's partially our own fault. Because this is what we're promoting with our job ads. This is what we're looking for. Instead of looking for CVs to say, oh, you know what? I have a brain. I understand the principles of software engineering. And here's my experience. This is the value that I provided. These are the jobs I did. This is what I provided to the business. And I can go into detail of those projects. But no, what do we look for? We look for, do you know C#? You know what? It's not that hard to learn C#. I did it. It's not that hard. You more want to focus on someone that knows how to communicate with people, that knows how to reason, that knows software engineering. But it's a vicious circle. We promote it, and then we say, well, if we don't do this kind of development, we're not going to attract talent. Let me ask you, do you actually want to be valued by your technology stack? I know Greg, well, he's cool because he knows event sourcing, and Barry over there, no. Well, Mary's cool as well. She knows event sourcing, but Barry, no. He only knows CouchDB. How? That's really not what I would want to be evaluated on. Because you know what? Technologies do come and go, and we've presenced it for the past 20, 25 years. So, you know, it is actually our job. It's our job. We need to be on the cutting edge. I'm not saying we shouldn't be learning. We actually, in fact, need to learn. We need to evaluate every technology that comes. We need to know what's going on around us. Because at times, there are things that are better. There are things that actually might solve problems. But question when you adopt these things. Don't do hype-driven development, which unfortunately is very common. Oh, everyone's using X, I got to use X. Are you adopting based on technology radars? Do your own technology radar. Think for yourself. You know, things come and go. Don't take too seriously all of these thought leaders. People also make mistakes. And don't do adoption based on assumed correlation. Well, Netflix adopted, because Netflix openly talks about this, that's why I put it here. Netflix adopted microservices. Netflix is successful. We should adopt microservices. Netflix might not have the same needs as you. You're not streaming live video, showing catalogs, movies, etc., and making people binge watch and lose their life. But hey, I love Netflix. It's just come to Spain. Very happy. So yeah, I'm actually waiting for this to finish and go finish watching Orange is the New Black. So my main point with this is we need to learn. We really do. We need to evaluate technologies, all of that. But what we need to do is focus on the right things. And when we make these decisions, we need to really take away all of our, selfish aspects. And it's okay to be selfish, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to put a project or other things at risk just because we want to learn. But honestly, value things and say, when should we adopt? Why should we adopt it? And what business value does that actually bring me, apart from my own personal satisfaction? And now with that, having said all that, please go learn and apply everything you learn in this conference. Thank you.